The Galactic Council Academy stood tall on Zentara Prime with its crystal towers reaching toward the purple sky, and inside Lecture Hall 7, 200 cadets from 47 different species were settling into their seats preparing for their mandatory xenobiology and threat assessment course, and the hall buzzed with quiet chatter as students adjusted their translation devices and opened their datapads. Instructor Velthor was a distinguished Zentaran scholar with silver scales covering his body and 4 amber eyes that could focus on different things at once. And he moved to the front of the chamber with practiced grace, activating the holographic display that hung in the air above the lecture platform, and the image of a rotating planet appeared showing deep blue oceans and green-brown landmasses spinning slowly. Today we discuss the most dangerous classification in our database. Velthor began, and his clicks and whistles came through the translators as clear, galactic common, and he paused, letting the words sink in among the assembled students who shifted nervously in their adaptive seating, and the casual atmosphere in the hall changed instantly to one of focused attention. The topic was Deathworld species, and why they were forbidden from military service in council operations, and tales of Deathworlders were whispered in dormitories across council space like ghost stories told to frighten young cadets, and now they were about to learn the reality behind those frightening tales. A Deathworld, Velthor continued, is any planet with gravity exceeding 1.3 standard units or atmospheric toxicity above level 4, or containing megafauna, capable of threatening sapient life and creatures that evolved. On such worlds develop extraordinary abilities, and he gestured to the hologram, which zoomed in to show mountain ranges and deep oceans and vast forests. These species develop enhanced strength and regenerative capabilities and resistance to toxins, and most disturbing of all, an irrational persistence in the face of certain death, and the instructor's voice carried a weight that made several cadets lean back in their seats, as if the words themselves were dangerous. Among the cadets seated in the back row beside a nervous Krillian exchange student sat Ryan Cooper, and the young human kept his expression carefully neutral, with his blue eyes fixed on the presentation ahead, and he had been advised during orientation to keep a low profile, though no one had explicitly told him why. And now sitting through this lecture he was beginning to understand. Ryan wore the same standard cadet uniform as everyone else, and his brown hair was cut in the regulation style, and nothing about his appearance marked him as different from the dozens of other bipedal species in the hall, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Velthor expanded the hologram to show various creatures, and a 6-legged predator with claws like knives appeared first, and then a serpentine creature that dripped glowing venom from its fangs, and finally a massive herbivore that could crush anything beneath its enormous feet. These, the instructor said gravely, are from a Class 12 death world. And now imagine a species that not only survived alongside such creatures but became the dominant sapient life form. And his 4 eyes scanned the crowd, watching the reactions. A murmur rippled through the audience like wind through grass, and several students exchanged worried glances, and the Krillian beside Ryan, whose name was Zix, shifted all 4 of his arms in obvious anxiety. The species that concern us most evolved on Class 13 worlds. Velthor continued, and there are only 4 known inhabited planets with this designation. And he paused for effect, letting the tension build. And one of those species recently made contact with the council. The hologram changed, and a bipedal figure appeared standing upright with 2 arms and 2 legs and forward-facing eyes in a frame that looked remarkably fragile compared to the monsters shown earlier. Humans, Velthor announced, and the words seemed to echo in the silent hall as 200 cadets stared at the image, and from the planet they call Earth. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained perfectly still, and his hands rested calmly on his datapad. And he had known this moment was coming ever since he saw the course syllabus. But knowing and experiencing were 2 very different things. Do not let their appearance deceive you, the instructor warned, and his tone grew more serious as he gestured to the human figure. And human strength is 3 to 4 times that of a Zentaran, and their bones are reinforced with calcium deposits that make them incredibly difficult to break, and their healing factor allows them to recover from injuries that would kill most species. He continued speaking, and with each fact, the atmosphere in the hall grew heavier, and they can survive in temperature ranges that span nearly 80 degrees, and they consume mild toxins for recreation, and their endurance is legendary. and even their predators learned to fear them. A cadet near the front raised a tentacle hesitantly, and surely this is exaggeration. Instructor. The translator rendered the question with obvious skepticism. Velthor's expression grew somber, and I wish it were and let me share documented incidents, and he pulled up a file that appeared in the air, and a human named Kyle Brennan was attacked by a Korth Ripper during a diplomatic mission, and the Ripper's venom is fatal to 98% of known species within minutes. The hall was completely silent now, and the human fought off the creature despite being bitten 3 times and carried a wounded Therian diplomat 2 kilometers to safety and survived, and he was released from medical care in 6 days. Several cadets made sounds of disbelief, and Zix's 4 arms wrapped around his torso in a protective gesture. Another incident. Velthor continued, and a human colony ship suffered catastrophic failure in deep space, and the crew survived in minimal life support, in near-freezing temperatures on emergency rations for 47 days, until rescue arrived, and all 23 humans survived, and the report indicated they spent their time exercising to maintain body heat and playing games to preserve morale. More holographic images appeared showing humans climbing sheer rock faces and running extraordinary distances and diving to crushing ocean depths, and each image seemed more impossible than the last. Their planet tried to kill them at every turn. Velthor explained, and predators in the waters and predators on land, and predators in the air and diseases, and parasites and extreme weather patterns and tectonic instability, and yet humans thrived. They developed endurance hunting, and the instructor showed a video simulation of early humans and chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, and they formed pack bonds so strong that they will die protecting their group, and they created art and music and philosophy while simultaneously perfecting the art of warfare. The instructor's voice took on a warning tone. And this is why the Council has strict regulations regarding Deathworld species, and they are too dangerous and too unpredictable. And their mindset is fundamentally different from civilized species, where we see an unwinnable scenario, they see a challenge, and where we recognize the wisdom of retreat, they often choose to fight. And this psychological divergence makes them unsuitable for integration into Council military forces. A Vexian cadet with purple shimmering skin asked nervously, "And are humans permitted in the academy?" The instructor and several other students leaned forward waiting for the answer. "The Council's position is under review," Velthor replied carefully, "and cultural exchange is permitted and limited civilian interaction, and but military service and combat. Roles and positions of authority remain restricted, and the risk is simply too great." Ryan felt Zix glance in his direction, and they had been roommates for 3 weeks now, and Zix had always been friendly, if a bit nervous around Ryan, and now the human wondered if his roommate was making connections. "Humans possess one final trait that makes them particularly dangerous," Velthor said, and his voice dropped lower, and they form emotional attachments quickly and deeply, and a human who bonds with you will protect you with irrational ferocity. And but a human who sees you as an enemy becomes relentless. They do not forget, and they do not forgive easily, and they absolutely refuse to give up. The instructor displayed a final image showing a quote from a human philosopher, and the words hung in the air for everyone to read. "We choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard." That, Velthor said quietly, is the human mindset, and they actively seek difficulty, because overcoming it gives them purpose, and it is simultaneously admirable and terrifying. As the lecture concluded, cadets filed out in clusters, and their conversations were animated and nervous, and Ryan gathered his data pad, slowly preparing to leave unnoticed among the crowd, and he had made it almost to the door when he heard his name. "Ryan," a voice called out. He turned to find Instructor Velthor approaching, and the Zenteran's 4 eyes were fixed on him with what might have been curiosity, or concern, or perhaps both. "A word, please," the instructor said, "and I believe there is something we need to discuss." The lecture hall suddenly felt very empty, as the last students disappeared into the corridor, and Ryan realized that his carefully maintained anonymity was about to end, and his presence at the academy was about to become significantly more complicated than he had ever imagined. Ryan stood motionless as the last few cadets filed out of the lecture hall, and their chattering voices faded into the corridor beyond, and Instructor Velthor remained near the holographic display with his scaled fingers moving across the control interface to dismiss the images of Earth and its dangerous inhabitants. "You handled that with impressive composure," the Zentaran said, and his translator carried a tone of what Ryan had learned to recognize as respect, and most beings would have shown some reaction to hearing their entire species described as dangerous predators. "You weren't wrong," Ryan replied evenly, "and everything you said about humans was accurate." Velthor's eyes blinked in sequence, which was a gesture Ryan had come to understand. "Meant surprise, and you are not offended?" he asked. Should I be Ryan crossed his arms in a defensive human gesture he immediately regretted, and he forced himself to relax. "And you presented facts based on documented evidence. And Earth is a Class 13. Deathworld and humans did evolve alongside creatures that would terrify most species here. And yeah, we're stubborn as hell." The instructor's mandibles clicked softly, which was the Zentaran equivalent of a chuckle, "and your presence here puts me in an interesting position. Cadet Cooper and the Council approved your attendance as part of the cultural exchange program. But I suspect few expected a human to actually survive the entrance examinations. I placed in the top 15%. Ryan said, and he couldn't keep a slight edge from his voice. "Yes, you did," Velthor agreed, "and which is remarkable, considering the tests were designed for species with very different physiological capabilities." And he moved closer with his posture shifting to what Ryan had learned was a more casual stance among Zentarans. "And tell me, how much did you hold back during the physical assessments?" Ryan's silence was answer enough. "I suspected as much," Velthor continued. "And the Academy's gravity is set to 0.87 standard units, which means you are constantly operating at significantly below your natural capacity, and your endurance trials and your strength tests all performed while essentially weighted down, and yet you still exceeded the majority of your peers. I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable," Ryan admitted, "and the Council already has concerns about humans, and I figured showing up and crushing every physical record wouldn't exactly help our case for integration." Velthor's scales rippled, which was a sign of appreciation and wise beyond your years, young human. But this creates a dilemma, and the other cadets do not know what you are, and to them, you are simply another species they have not encountered before, and your file lists you as coming from a Class 8 world, which is a deliberate obfuscation, approved by the Council's diplomatic corps. "To avoid exactly what happened today," Ryan said, as understanding dawned, "and you gave a lecture about how dangerous humans are, and the entire time there was a human sitting in the room, and if the other cadets find out, they will be frightened. Velthor finished, and some will be hostile and others will refuse to work with you, which in a military academy is particularly problematic, and team cohesion is essential to our training program." Ryan felt frustration building in his chest. "And so what do you want me to do, and drop out and pretend I didn't hear you describe my entire species as barely civilized predators who can't be trusted in positions of authority? I want you to understand the reality of the situation," Velthor said, and his tone was firm but not unkind. "And I gave that lecture because it is mandatory, and because Council regulations require that. Cadets understand the dangers of Deathworld species, but I also gave it because knowledge dispels fear." "Could have fooled me," Ryan muttered, "and sounded more like you were making everyone terrified of humans right now." "Yes," Velthor agreed, but consider this, and before today, most of these cadets had never heard of humans, and you were exotic and unusual, and perhaps a bit odd in your habits, but now they have context, and they understand that your species evolved under extreme conditions, and when you eventually reveal what you are, they will have to reconcile the terrifying Deathworlder from my lecture with the Ryan Cooper they have come to know over these past weeks." Ryan processed this, and his mind working through the implications. "And you're saying the lecture was actually meant to help me in the long run?" "I am saying that ignorance breeds fear, but familiarity breeds understanding," Velthor replied. "And your roommate Jix, and how does he treat you?" "Like a friend," Ryan said immediately. "And we study together and grab meals together, and he's teaching me Krillian meditation techniques. And when he learns you are human, that bond will already exist," Velthor said. "And the theoretical Deathworlder will clash with the reality of the person he knows." And his eyes gleamed. "And this is why your presence here is so valuable, Ryan Cooper. And you are not just a cadet, and you are an ambassador, whether you accepted that role or not." Before Ryan could respond, the door to the lecture hall hissed open and 3 cadets entered deep in conversation, and Ryan recognized them immediately as Lisa Morgan, who was a communications specialist from his tactical studies group, and a Therian named Quinn, with deep orange fur, and a towering Korvax whose name Ryan could never quite pronounce correctly. They stopped short when they noticed the human and instructor talking. "Apologies," Lisa said, and her translator rendered her species' harmonic tones into common, "and we did not mean to interrupt, and we wanted to review the holographic files from today's lecture for our assignment." "No interruption," Velthor assured them. "And I was just discussing the material with Cadet Cooper, and please access what you need," as the 3 cadets moved to the display. Terminal Ryan prepared to leave, but Lisa called out to him, "Cooper, you are in our tactical group, correct?" And when Ryan nodded, she continued, "And what did you think of the lecture? And the information about humans was disturbing." Ryan felt Velthor's eyes on him, watching carefully. And this was a test, he realized, and how he answered would matter. "It was informative," Ryan said carefully. "And though I think it is important to remember that the lecture focused on biological capabilities, not character, and a species that evolved under harsh conditions is not automatically evil or hostile. But the instructor said they were too dangerous for military integration." Quinn interjected, and his translator carried a nervous tone, "and that their psychology is fundamentally different. Different is not the same as wrong." Ryan countered, "And every species here has different psychology, and Xanterans have 4-lobed brains and process information in parallel, and Therians have enhanced sensory perception. That makes you more aware of your surroundings than I could ever be. And Korvax have eidetic memory, and we are all different." The Korvax, whose name Ryan thought might be Torax, rumbled a response, and "but humans actively seek danger," and the instructor showed evidence of this irrational behavior. Ryan glanced at Velthor, who remained silent, allowing the conversation to unfold. "Maybe it seems irrational from the outside," Ryan said. "And but humans do not seek danger for its own sake, and we push ourselves. Because growth requires challenge, and we explore. Because curiosity drives us, and we fight when necessary. Because sometimes the alternative is worse than the risk." Lisa tilted her head, which was a gesture of consideration in her species. "And you seem to understand them well for someone from a Class 8 world." Ryan's heart rate increased. But he kept his expression neutral. "And I read a lot. And the human situation interests me because it raises important questions about how we define civilization. And are we civilized because we avoid danger, or because we have learned to face it with wisdom and courage? Philosophy at this hour." Quinn said with what Ryan had learned was Therian humor. "And the human lecture has made us all contemplative." The group laughed and the tension broke, and soon they were deep in discussion about the assignment, and Ryan participated, offering insights while carefully avoiding anything too specific about human capabilities. As they worked, Velthor quietly left the lecture hall, but not before catching Ryan's eye and giving a subtle nod of approval. Later that evening, Ryan returned to the quarters he shared with Jix, and the Krillian was at his desk with his forearms working simultaneously on different data pads, which was a talent that never ceased to amaze Ryan. "You are back late," Jix observed without looking up, "and I assume Instructor Velthor wished to discuss the lecture." "Something like that," Ryan said, and he dropped onto his bunk, and the furniture was designed to be universal, but it still felt slightly too small for his frame. "And did you know and about what I am?" Jix's arms stopped moving, and slowly he turned to face Ryan with his large eyes blinking. "And I suspected, and you move with efficiency. Unusual for species claiming origin from low-gravity worlds, and your strength when you believe no one is watching. And the way you adapted to academy food that made half our class ill in the first week." Ryan sat up. "And you never said anything. Why would I?" Jix's translator carried a tone of genuine confusion. "And you are my roommate and my friend, and whether you are from a Class 8 world or a Class 13 world, changes nothing about the person you have shown yourself to be." "The lecture today made humans sound like monsters," Ryan said quietly. "The lecture today explained why humans are formidable," Jix corrected. "And there is a difference. And I am Krillian, and my species evolved as prey animals on a world of predators, and we are skittish and nervous, and we possess very little physical strength. But we survived through intelligence and cooperation and adaptability. 3 weeks after the lecture, Ryan had settled into an uncomfortable rhythm, and the Academy continued its rigorous training schedule, pushing cadets through tactical simulations and zero-gravity combat exercises and diplomatic scenario workshops, and he maintained his careful performance, never quite excelling, but never falling behind and always aware of who was watching and what conclusions they might draw. The whispers had started, though, and small conversations that died when he approached, and curious glances during physical training, and a few cadets who had been friendly now kept their distance. And Ryan pretended not to notice, but each avoidance felt like a small, cut Lisa. Morgan was not among those who withdrew, and if anything, the communications specialist had become more intrigued, and she watched Ryan with analytical eyes during their study sessions. "Your species has an interesting approach to hierarchical structures," she commented one afternoon as their tactical study group reviewed a particularly complex negotiation simulation, and the group had grown to include 6 cadets, which were Ryan and Lisa, and Zix, and Quinn and Torax, and a Drellian named Kiva, whose crystalline exoskeleton refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. "How?" So Ryan asked, and he tried to focus on the scenario rather than the personal direction of the conversation. According to the database, most species from low-gravity worlds develop very rigid command structures because physical confrontation is rare, Lisa explained, but your assessment reports show you adapt easily to both hierarchical and cooperative models, and you are comfortable leading or following without ego investment in either. Roljix's eyes flickered toward Ryan, and it was a Krillian expression of concern that the human had learned to recognize. "Maybe my world valued flexibility," Ryan offered, and he kept his tone casual and adapting to circumstances rather than insisting on one approach, or Lisa continued, and her harmonic tones took on a sharper quality. "And maybe the database classification of your homeworld is not entirely accurate." The study room fell silent, and 4 sets of alien eyes fixed on Ryan, while Zix suddenly became very interested in his data. Pad Torax's deep voice rumbled through his translator. "And you suspect something, Lisa?" "I observe patterns," Lisa replied, "and Cadet Cooper excels at endurance tasks while claiming to come from a low-gravity world, and his reflexes during combat simulations exceed those of species known for quick responses, and he maintains focus during long-duration exercises that exhaust most of us, and his psychological profile shows risk tolerance far above standard parameters for his supposed world classification. Lots of species have good endurance." Quinn interjected nervously, and his orange fur rippled with discomfort. "And this seems like an accusation." "It is not an accusation," Lisa said, "and it is a question. And Cooper, are you from a Class 8 world?" "As your file indicates." Ryan's mind raced, and this was the moment he had been dreading and expecting. And he could deny it and maintain the fiction, but that would mean lying to people who had become colleagues, if not quite friends, or he could tell the truth and face whatever consequences came. He thought of Zix's words about letting people come to the realization naturally, and it will be more meaningful that way. "No," Ryan said quietly, "and I'm not." The room's atmosphere shifted immediately, and Kiva's crystalline structure pulsed with agitation, and Quinn's fur flattened against his body in a clear stress response, and Torax leaned back, creating distance. "What classification?" Lisa pressed, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Class 13, Ryan admitted, "and I'm human." For 3 full seconds nobody moved, and then Kiva stood abruptly and their chair scraped against the floor. "And you are a Deathworlder and from the species Instructor Velthor lectured about?" "Yes," Ryan said. "You lied to us," Quinn said. And his voice was high and strained, "and you have been lying since you arrived." "I didn't lie," Ryan said carefully, "and my file classification was assigned by the Council's Diplomatic Corps, not by me, and I never claimed to be something I'm not, and I just didn't correct assumptions. That is semantics." Torax rumbled, "and a lie of omission is still deception." Jix finally looked up from his datapad, and he did not deceive me, and I knew. All eyes turned to the Krillian. "You knew," Quinn's translator squeaked, with disbelief, "and you shared quarters with a Deathworld predator, and you knew." "He is not a predator," Jix said firmly. And he is Ryan Cooper, who helps me with tactical theory because spatial reasoning is not my strength, and who adjusts the room temperature to a compromise between our preferences, and who has never once used his physical advantages to intimidate or dominate. And the fact that his planet is dangerous does not make him dangerous. The instructor said their psychology is different, Kiva insisted, and their light patterns flickered rapidly, and that they refuse to accept defeat, and that they bond irrationally and form hostile fixations. Have I done anything to hurt any of you? Ryan asked, and he kept his voice level. And in 3 months at this academy, have I given you any reason to fear me? You hid what you were, Lisa said, and that alone suggests you knew your presence would be unwelcome. Of course, I knew, Ryan admitted, and I sat through a lecture where an instructor I respect explained to 200 cadets why my species is too dangerous to serve alongside yours. And I watched people I'd been studying with for weeks learn that creatures like me are considered threats. And you think I didn't understand what that meant? Then, why are you here, Torax demanded, and if you knew you were not wanted, why come at all? Because someone has to be first, Ryan said. And he echoed the words he had told Zix weeks ago. And because humans want to be part of the galactic community, but we can't do that if we stay isolated. And because I believed, maybe naively, that if people got to know me first, they might judge me as an individual, rather than as a category. Quinn's fur was still flat, but his voice had lost some of its panic. And you have been holding back, and during training and during assessments, and what are you actually capable of? Ryan considered how to answer that, and in standard academy gravity, I'm operating at about 60% of my natural strength and endurance, and the endurance trials that exhaust most cadets in 40 minutes I could maintain for 3 or 4 hours, and maybe longer, and the strength tests where I ranked in the top 15%. I was being very careful not to break the equipment spirits of the void, Kiva whispered, and their usual harmonics were distorted by what might have been fear. But none of that matters. Ryan continued, and because I'm not here to prove I'm stronger, or faster, or tougher than anyone else. And I'm here to learn the same things you're learning, and tactics and diplomacy and leadership and cooperation, and the physical stuff is just biology. And it's what I choose to do with those capabilities that defines who I am. Pretty words, Lisa said, though her tone was more thoughtful than hostile now. But the instructor's lecture detailed numerous cases of human unpredictability and aggression and irrational persistence in combat. My species has a violent history, Ryan agreed, and we're not proud of everything we've done. But we've also learned from our mistakes, and we've built societies based on cooperation, and on protecting the weak, and on striving to be better than our worst impulses. And every species in the Council has darkness in their past, and humans aren't unique in that. We are not classified as Deathworlders, Torax pointed out. No. But I've read Korvac's history, Ryan said, and he met the massive being's gaze. And your people fought 3 global wars before achieving unity, and billions died. And your literature from that period describes horrors that would make most species recoil. But you learned and you grew. And you became the Korvax, sitting in this room, who volunteers at the Academy Medical Center, and tutors younger cadets in mathematics, and your past doesn't define your present. Torax was silent for a long moment, and then slowly his posture relaxed slightly. And you have studied our history. I've studied everyone's history, Ryan said, and Zentaran philosophical evolution, and Krillian survival strategies, and Therian pack dynamics, and Drellian crystalline memory architecture. And I wanted to understand the people I'd be learning alongside. That is unexpected, Kiva admitted, and their light patterns slowed to a more stable rhythm. Zix spoke up again, and this is what I meant when I said you should know him as a person first. And yes, Ryan is human, and yes, his species evolved under conditions that would kill most of us, but he is also the cadet who stayed up all night helping Torax prepare for the diplomacy examination, and who taught Lisa a human mnemonic technique that improved her test scores, and who shares his meal rations when someone forgets theirs. And these things are also true, but which truth is more fundamental? Quinn asked, though his fur was beginning to rise again, which was a sign of calming stress levels in the Deathworlder, or the friend. Why can't it be both? Ryan asked, and I am human, and that comes with certain biological realities, but I'm also Ryan Cooper, who chose to come here to try to build bridges and to prove that different doesn't have to mean dangerous, and you get to decide which of those truths matters more to you. The study group sat in uncomfortable silence, processing the revelation and its implications, and finally Lisa spoke. "I am not certain I am comfortable continuing to work with you," she said honestly, "and I need time to reconcile what I know about humans with what I know about you." "That's fair," Ryan said, and his chest was tight, but his voice stayed steady. "And I understand." The revelation of Ryan's true nature spread through the academy, faster than a hull breach venting atmosphere, and by the next morning everyone knew there was a human among them, and a Deathworlder, and a creature from the species that instructor Velthor had described in such vivid and unsettling detail. Reactions varied widely, and some cadets like Zix and the study group maintained their relationships with cautious but genuine acceptance, and others kept obvious distance with their body language screaming discomfort whenever Ryan entered a room, and a few like a Drellian named Vorn and his circle of friends made their hostility clear through pointed comments and aggressive posturing. Ryan endured it all with patient determination, though he could feel the weight of constant scrutiny wearing on him, and every movement was analyzed and every word was dissected for hidden aggression, and he felt like a specimen under observation, and simultaneously fascinating and frightening to those around him. Instructor Velthor called him to his office 3 days after the revelation. "You have created quite the disruption," the Zentran said without preamble. "I answered questions honestly," Ryan replied, "and he stood at attention in the formal manner the Academy required, and was I supposed to lie?" "No," Velthor admitted, and his scales rippled in what Ryan had learned was contemplation. "And though I suspect you could have managed the revelation with more finesse," and he gestured to a chair, "and sit. And we are not in the lecture hall." Ryan sat, and he was grateful for the informality. "How are you handling the attention?" Velthor asked. "I've been called worse things than Deathworlder," Ryan said with a slight smile. "And at least now, I don't have to pretend to be winded after a 2-kilometer run. Yes, several instructors have reported that your performance in physical training has dramatically improved," Velthor noted dryly, "and apparently you have been operating at a fraction of your capability." "I was trying not to scare anyone," Ryan said. "A noble goal if ultimately futile," Velthor replied, and he leaned back in his chair in a posture that made him appear almost casual. "And Ryan Cooper, I am going to be direct with you, and your presence here is controversial, and the Council has received multiple complaints from Academy overseers about allowing a Deathworlder into military training, and some want you expelled for security reasons." Ryan's stomach dropped. "And are you going to expel me?" "No," Velthor said firmly, "and I have argued strongly against it. And you have broken no rules, and your academic performance is exemplary. And despite the discomfort your revelation has caused, you have conducted yourself with remarkable restraint and diplomacy." And his eyes focused intently on Ryan. "But you must understand the precarious nature of your position, and any incident and any perceived aggression and any hint that you might be dangerous will be used as justification to remove you and potentially bar all humans from future admission." "No pressure." Then Ryan muttered, "Indeed," Velthor agreed, "and which is why I am concerned about the tensions developing between you and certain cadets, and Vorn in particular seems intent on provoking you." "I'm ignoring him," Ryan said, "and engaging would just prove I'm the aggressive Deathworlder everyone expects," wise Velthor acknowledged. "And however, be aware that some may interpret your restraint as weakness, and in a military academy, perceived weakness invites challenge." The instructor's warning proved prophetic, and 2 days later, during a combat simulation exercise, the situation escalated. The simulation involved teams of 5 cadets working through a hostage rescue scenario, and Ryan's team included Zix and Quinn, and a Zentran named Rylax, and a Therian called Dana, and they were meant to coordinate their approach using each member's strengths to achieve the objective. The opposing team, playing the role of hostage takers, included Vorn. What should have been a standard training exercise devolved quickly, and Vorn's team broke protocol repeatedly, using excessive force and ignoring the safety parameters built into the simulation, and when Ryan's team breached the objective, room Vorn was waiting. "The Deathworlder comes to save the day," Vorn announced through his translator, and his crystalline structure pulsed with aggressive red patterns. "And let us see if you are as dangerous as the stories claim." This is a training exercise, Ryan said calmly, though his heart rate was accelerating and we're supposed to follow the scenario. I am following my own scenario, Vorn replied, and demonstrating what happens when a predator is challenged by his prey. He lunged forward and his crystalline fist swung toward Ryan's head and the human dodged easily, and his enhanced reflexes made Vorn's attack seem almost slow motion. Stand down, Ryan ordered, and he backed away. And I'm not fighting you, because you know you would lose. Vorn taunted and he pressed forward or because you know that if you fight they will expel you, and what is it like, Deathworlder, to have such power and be forbidden from using it? The other cadets in the simulation were frozen and they were unsure how to respond, and the monitoring instructors' voices crackled over the communication system ordering both parties to disengage, but Vorn ignored them. Fight me, Vorn demanded, and he shoved Ryan hard, and the human stumbled back but maintained his balance and show everyone what humans are really like and show them the predator beneath the civilized mask. No, Ryan said through gritted teeth, and every instinct was screaming at him to respond and to defend himself and to make Vorn regret the challenge, but he thought of Velthor's warning and of the weight of representation he carried and of the consequences not just for himself, but for every human who might come after him. Pathetic, Vorn spat, and the mighty Deathworlder is nothing. But he never finished the sentence, and Quinn, with his orange fur standing on end with agitation, stepped between them. Enough, the Therian said, and his voice was shaking but determined. And Cadet Vorn, you are violating training protocols and engaging in unsanctioned aggression, and stand down immediately. Move aside, prey animal. Vorn snarled, and this does not concern you. It concerns all of us, Jix said, and he joined Quinn, and his forearms were spread wide in a Krillian defensive posture, and you are dishonoring the Academy and yourself with this behavior. You defend the predator. Vorn's crystalline structure flashed with incredulity. And he has deceived you and manipulated you, and you protect him. He has done nothing but train alongside us. With honor, Quinn insisted, and you are the one demonstrating aggression and deception. Rylax and Dana moved to flank Ryan as well, and they created a barrier between him and Vorn. And the Drellian stood alone, and his hostility now directed at multiple targets. You are all fools, Vorn declared, and when the Deathworlder turns on you and when his true nature emerges, you will remember this moment, and you will remember that I tried to show you the truth. The truth, Ryan said quietly, is that you're trying to provoke me into violence so you can justify your prejudice, and it's not going to work. The simulation abruptly ended, and the holographic environment dissolved to reveal the training bay's actual walls, and 3 instructors entered, and their expressions ranged from angry to concerned. Senior Instructor Cax, who was a Korvax with deep bronze coloring, approached the group. And what happened here? Multiple voices tried to explain at once, and Cax raised a hand for silence, and then pointed at Ryan and you, and Report Ryan snapped to attention, and Sir Cadet Vorn deviated from the simulation parameters and engaged in unprovoked aggression, and I declined to respond physically, and my teammates intervened to de-escalate the situation, and that is my full report. Sir Cax turned to Vorn, and is this accurate? The human is a threat, Vorn insisted, and I was attempting to demonstrate. You were attempting to provoke a fellow cadet into violating Academy regulations. Cax interrupted, and I watched. The entire incident through the monitors, and your actions were clear violations of training protocol. And he looked at the other cadets. And as was your interference, though, your intentions appear to have been protective rather than aggressive, sir. If I may, Zix spoke up, and Cadet Cooper maintained remarkable restraint despite significant provocation, and he de-escalated rather than engaged. And this seems worthy of note. Cax's expression was unreadable and noted. And Cadet Vorn, you will report to the disciplinary committee, and the rest of you dismissed, and except you, Cooper, and you stay. As the others filed out, Quinn touched Ryan's arm briefly in a gesture of support, and Jix's eyes conveyed concern, and then the human was alone with the instructors. That could have ended very badly, Cax said once the training bay was clear. Yes, sir, Ryan agreed. Vorn is twice your mass and possesses crystalline striking surfaces that could shatter bone, Cax continued, and if you had engaged, you likely would have been seriously injured. Ryan said nothing, though he suspected that assessment was incorrect. However, Cax said, and his tone shifted slightly, and I am not ignorant of human capabilities, and I reviewed the files after your revelation, and In truth, if you had engaged at full capacity, Vorn would likely be in the medical center right now, and possibly with permanent damage. I would never. Ryan started. I know Cax interrupted, and that is my point, and you possess the physical capability to end that confrontation decisively, but you chose restraint, and that is the mark of a true warrior, and knowing when not to fight. One of the other instructors, who was a Zentran named Lexus, spoke up. And however your restraint may be interpreted as weakness by some cadets, and this could invite further challenges. 6 weeks after the incident with Vorn, Ryan found himself standing in one of the Academy's most prestigious spaces, which was the Grand Simulation Chamber, and the massive spherical room could generate any environment and any scenario, and any challenge the instructors could imagine. And it was where final examinations took place, and where visiting dignitaries observed demonstrations of cadet capabilities, and where today Ryan was about to face his most important test. Not a test of strength or skill, but a test of trust. The chamber's observation gallery was packed, and word had spread that the human cadet would be participating in a demonstration exercise, and curiosity had drawn cadets and instructors, and even some council observers, and Ryan could see Zix in the front row with his forearms folded in an expression of confidence, and Lisa and Quinn and Torax and Kiva were nearby. And even cadets who had previously avoided Ryan were present, with their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Instructor Velthor stood at the control podium, and his 4 eyes scanned the assembled crowd. And we are here today, he announced, and his translator carried his words throughout the chamber, and to observe a practical examination in crisis response and team coordination. And this exercise will test not only individual capabilities, but the ability to work effectively under pressure with diverse team members. The lights dimmed, and the simulation environment began to materialize, and a damaged space station appeared around them, with its corridors sparking with electrical fires and venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, and warning klaxons blared, and emergency lighting cast everything in red and shadow. The scenario, Velthor continued, is a critical failure aboard a diplomatic station, and multiple casualties and structural damage, and limited time before total life support failure. And your objective is to rescue survivors and prevent catastrophic collapse of the station's reactor core. And you will have 15 minutes. 5 other cadets entered the chamber, joining Ryan in the simulation, and he recognized them all as Zix, naturally, and 4 others from various species whom Ryan had trained with over the past months, and a Korvax named Petra, and a Zentran called Civ, and a Therian named Cole, and a Drellian named Kes. Cadet Cooper will serve as team leader for this exercise, Velthor announced. A murmur rippled through the observation gallery, and putting a human in command was unprecedented and controversial, and Ryan felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Understood, sir, Ryan said calmly, though his heart was racing. And team gather for briefing. The 5 cadets assembled around him, and in the low gravity of the damaged station simulation, they floated slightly, with magnetic boots keeping them anchored. We have 15 minutes and multiple objectives, Ryan said quickly, and his mind already prioritizing. And Zix, you have the best technical skills, and I need you on the reactor. And can you stabilize it? If the damage is not too extensive, Zix replied. And I will require assistance. Take Civ, Ryan said, and Zentaran manual dexterity, and your technical knowledge should complement each other. And he turned to Petra and Korvax, strength and durability, and you're on structural stabilization and shore up the critical junction points, and work with Cole and Therian. Environmental awareness will help identify the most dangerous instabilities in me, Kes asked, and their crystalline structure glowed with anticipation. You and I are on rescue, Ryan said. Andrelians can survive in hard vacuum longer than most species, and humans can tolerate extreme conditions, and will extract the survivors from the damaged sections. You are not keeping the human away from the dangerous work, someone in the observation gallery noted audibly, and Ryan ignored it. One more thing, Ryan said to his team. And I'm human, and that means I can handle situations that might incapacitate you, and if I tell you to fall back, you fall back immediately. And no arguments, and your safety is my responsibility as team leader. And clear, they responded in unison. Then let's move, Ryan said. And clock is running. The team split up and each pair moving toward their objectives, and Ryan and Kess navigated through corridors choked with debris and leaking atmosphere. And the simulation was brutally realistic, with gravity fluctuations and temperature extremes and the constant threat of structural collapse. There Kess pointed to a sealed door and life signs beyond, and 3 individuals and 1 injured. Ryan examined the door and the control panel was dead, and the manual override was jammed and sealed by emergency protocols, and we need to force it. The door is reinforced alloy, Kess said, and it would take heavy equipment to breach or sufficient force. Ryan replied, and he positioned himself bracing against the opposite wall and stand clear. Kicked and the door shuddered but held, and he kicked again and again, and each impact calculated to stress the weakest points of the jam mechanism. And on the 5th kick, something gave way, and the door partially opened, twisted on its frame. That should not be possible, Kess said, and their translator carried astonishment. Human leg strength is adapted for jumping and running on a high-gravity world, Ryan explained, and he was already squeezing through the gap and comes in handy sometimes inside. They found 3 simulated survivors, which were holographic representations with detailed biometric data, and 1 was unconscious bleeding from a head wound, and the other 2 were mobile, but disoriented. Kess, get those 2 to the evacuation point, Ryan ordered, and I'll carry the injured one. You cannot carry a full-grown Korvax, Kess protested, and they outweigh you by half. Ryan carefully lifted the simulated casualty in a fireman's carry, and he distributed the weight across his shoulders, and in the simulation's reduced gravity it was manageable, though he made sure his exertion appeared realistic and human endurance adaptation, and we can carry heavy loads over long distances. And part of that persistence hunting thing, they navigated back through the deteriorating corridors, and Ryan's communication piece crackled with updates from the other teams. Reactor stabilization at 60%, Zix reported, and we need more time. Structural integrity failing in Section 7, Petra's deep voice rumbled, and recommending evacuation of that zone. Ryan processed the information rapidly, and all teams were running out of time, and Zix give me minimum viable stabilization, and Petra shore up the main junction only, and let the peripheral sections collapse if necessary, and all rescue teams priority evac now. Cooper, there are more survivors in Section 7. Cole's voice came through, but Petra says it's about to collapse. Ryan's mind raced, and in a real situation, he would never leave survivors behind, but this was a simulation and a test, and he had to make command decisions based on overall mission success. How many survivors, he asked. 2, and both mobile. Cole replied. Can you reach them in 90 seconds? Ryan asked. A pause. And possibly, and it will be extremely dangerous. In the observation gallery, the watching cadets and instructors leaned forward, and this was the moment. And would the human risk his team for a few simulated survivors? And would the death world mentality of never surrendering override tactical judgment? Negative, Ryan said firmly, and the risk to the rescue team outweighs the potential save, and Section 7 is lost, and focus on confirmed rescues and evac. But Cole started. That's an order, Ryan said, and his tone allowed no argument and team leader's responsibility. And I own this decision. The simulation continued, and Ryan and Kess delivered their casualties to the evacuation point, and Zix and Civ achieved minimum reactor stabilization with 43 seconds to spare, and Petra and Cole shored up the critical junctions and evacuated just as Section 7 collapsed in a spectacular display of explosive decompression. When the simulation ended and the grand chamber returned to its normal state, Ryan's team had successfully saved 12 of 14 survivors and prevented reactor meltdown and maintained sufficient structural integrity for a follow-up rescue operation. It was a passing grade, but not perfect. Instructor Velthor descended to the chamber floor, and his expression was unreadable, and the observation gallery was silent. Waiting for the assessment, Cadet Cooper Velthor began. And you made a difficult decision regarding Section 7. Yes, sir, Ryan responded, and I prioritized team safety and confirmed rescues over a high-risk attempt that could have resulted in additional casualties. Some would argue that a more aggressive approach utilizing your enhanced capabilities could have saved those additional survivors, Velthor said. Perhaps Ryan acknowledged, but I was not operating alone, and I had a team whose safety was my responsibility, and sending Cole into a collapsing section would have been reckless endangerment, regardless of my own capabilities, and my fun. though as a human you could potentially have made the rescue yourself. Velthor pressed Ryan met the instructor's gaze steadily. And a leader's job is not to be the hero, sir. And it's to make the decisions that give the mission and the team the best chance of success, and my enhanced capabilities are tools, but they don't override basic tactical judgment. Velthor's scales rippled, and to Ryan's surprise, the Zentaran's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile and correct answer, Cadet Cooper, and he turned to address the observation gallery. And what you witnessed today was not a demonstration of human physical superiority, though Cadet Cooper certainly utilized his species' advantages, and what you witnessed was a demonstration of command judgment and tactical prioritization, and most importantly, restraint.